he was that dark and that strong, it seems like there's room for some genre treatment in there.
However history remembers me, it shall only remember
a fraction of the truth.
Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is essentially a revenge story, or at least it starts that way. A young Abraham Lincoln sees his mother killed by vampires when he's 9 years old and swears vengeance and begins chopping heads off of bloodsuckers.
I shall kill them all.
In the course of his vampire hunter journey, sort of a superhero journey, he becomes involved in a greater political cause and becomes president of the United States and saves the nation.
7 years ago.
The novel Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter came about as a result of my previous novel, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. No matter what bookstore I went in, anywhere in the country, there would inevitably be two displays in the front of the store. One, a Lincoln biography table, and two, a Stephenie Meyer vampire table, like True Blood and Twilight and all those books, because it was the height of those books. So somewhat cynically, I said, wow, if you could combine those things, man, you'd really be onto something. And, you know, I went and I read a couple of Lincoln biographies just to see if there's anything there. And when I got into the actual story and tragedy that was his life, I started to fall in love with the actual guy. And to me, you know, being a fan my whole life of genre literature, being a fan of, you know, comics, it just started to read to me like a superhero origin story. Even though he has no family connections, no money, no education, he manages by the sheer power of his determination to pull himself up by his bootstraps and achieve not only the highest office in the land, but then save that land. And just through the sheer strength of will and genius, pull two warring factions together and save the dream that is America. If that's not a superhero story, I don't know what is. This was the first thing I'd ever been paid to write, the first screenplay, and obviously it was the first adaptation. And then on top of that, it was an adaptation of my own book, and so I had some ego that needed to be put in check. And so there were a lot of difficulties. One, with any adaptation, the difficulty is, what do you cut? What doesn't need to be there? The second question is, what needs to be there that isn't there? We went through many drafts of the script before we realized that we needed a central villain. In fact, we were pretty late in the process before we realized, wow, you know what would be nice if this vast vampire conspiracy actually had a face and a voice to it for Abe to battle against.
I have the silver. Soon I'll have the whole country. I'm gonna destroy the myth of Abraham Lincoln.
We also realized that we didn't have in the book a big, satisfying climax, something to really leave people on a thrilling high note. So that needed to be invented wholesale. Those were pretty difficult, especially the climax, because writing action's not something I do particularly well. Luckily, I had Timur, who is like this mad genius when it comes to action and will always take something that is an action staple and flip it on its head and make it something new. So he was a huge help to me in that way. It all begins with the script. It does. I mean, every department has to have the script to look at to know, okay, what are we doing? Whether it's the costume designer, what kind of clothes are they gonna need to fight in a sequence like that? They need to be loose enough so that Abe can do his axe twirling. And makeup has to know that we're gonna have to reapply prosthetics 20 times that day because of all the action we're doing. But hugely, effects. All the people that are doing the sort of previs, the animatics of what the action is gonna be, need to know what is the whole picture of the sequence we're trying to tell so that each individual piece means something. It's not just arbitrary shots. Everything has to tie together in a meaningful way.
History prefers legends to men.
Maybe there's the way that I describe the moonlight hitting the trees. So all of a sudden, when the effects people are doing their renderings, it's like, okay, well, we know it's gonna be this kind of atmosphere, and we know there's gonna be a thin layer of mist over the tracks. All these things are important, all of them come together, and obviously Timur is the filter for all of it, but at least the script has to give people a place to put their heads and to start thinking about something so that we're all literally on the same page.